Spoilerin time. This is the companion show to Cord Killers. On Cord Killers, we talk about how to watch things, the services, what's coming out. Then we watch the stuff and we talk about it here. This week we will spoil Star Trek Lower Decks, Season 2, Episode 7, What We Do in the Shadows, Season 3, Episode 5, and Ted Lasso, Season 2, Episode 10. I'm Tom Merritt. He's Brian Brushwood.
Heck yeah, which means the only question is, where do we begin our feast?
Let's start with Ted Lasso. Now, before we get into this week's episode about the funeral, we got some great feedback from y'all about the Coach Beard episode. Brian, what were people saying to us?
Well, I mean, basically, last week, I had very confused feelings. Like, am I giving up on Ted Lasso? He's never given up on me. I didn't care for the episode, so we asked for feedback. The vast majority of people who wrote in said that they appreciated the depth, the behind the scenes. He's a mysterious character. It's good. It was good to see another side of him. I would argue that because he's a mysterious character, that's why you wouldn't want to show them another side of him.
Thank you.
A couple of details that popped up was somebody pointed up that in all caps, holy crap, Beard ends up in room 237, which is this whole episode is Beard's Shining. That's the famous room from The Shining. And then he wrote back again, this is Harold, and saying technically it was the three guys he hooked up with, but still that was a good little nod that almost certainly has to be intentional. Brendan wrote in saying, you asked, the moment after Beard prayed, then went into the club, when he started dancing in the center of the dance floor, giving it his all, man, I felt that to my core. Want that released. This episode was a delight to me. Getting to see Beard move, dive into his psyche, and explore his emotions and feelings. One of his favorite episodes is what he said. So there are people who really dug it. However, there was one counterexample that I rather enjoyed reading. Aaron wrote in saying, I know you're looking for people who liked Beard After Hours to email in, but would you settle for the exact opposite? I think this may have been my least favorite episode of anything in a very long time. Not because it was a divergence of what I expected. I love the Christmas episode. I found it to be a dark, vapid malaise that would be off-putting in any context, but as an episode of a notoriously good-hearted and thoughtful show, it was rather like unwrapping a present and finding rotten meat. What's worse is that Beard is clearly in an abusive relationship with a really unhinged person. If you didn't pause to read the texts that she sent him, you should take a look. And there's little to no condemnation of that fact. In fact, he ends up dancing with his abuser at a club, replete with salvific imagery. That's upsetting in just the plain, won't anyone think of what the kids are getting from this sense? I love Ted Lasso, but I'll definitely skip this terrible episode on subsequent watches. Haven't seen After Hours, but no amount of LOL, it's a reference, could justify how genuinely bad this episode was. But man, that's somebody who is at peace with his opinion.
You definitely have a bias, Brian.
What do you mean?
You just gave more time to the one negative email we got.
Well, because the other eight,
of the positive emails that we got.
And
I
said
asked for the positive, saying we've already given you the negative take.
Look, I mean, what?
Tom, what are you doing?
Yeah.
It's the dark version of Spoilerin time. It's the Coach Beard After Hours.
Spoiler in place.
I gave 3 times as many comments on all the positive stuff.
But you mentioning the thing about Beard being a mysterious character was something I forgot to bring up last week, which is like we totally solved a lot of equations, or we got to see a lot about him, which is like not what you want to do with the mysterious character, not
what I wanted.
I'm 100% with both of you on that. On the other hand, they didn't give us a lot. This was a very weird episode, and it's hard to know what to believe and what not. So I think that's probably what they were thinking is we're not really telling you about Beard in this episode. We're giving you a version of Beard in this episode. I don't know if that works or not, but that it certainly wasn't a straight ahead telling of his character. And anyway, to the point about his relationship, her last name is Payne.
Oh, yeah, a bit on the nose there.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about No Weddings and a Funeral. This is the funeral for Rebecca's father and a chance to reclaim Never Gonna Give You Up from being a Rickroll.
Tom, how did you like this one?
So now I was going to start with you. I was going to like, do you think that this will stop people from thinking Rickroll when they hear Never Gonna Give You Up?
To be honest, I was kind of impressed that they were able to keep it from, well, although they did Rickroll us later on at the very end when during the VHS tape, and then you're watching this memory and all of a sudden it turns into a Rickroll. So they played both sides of it.
Yeah.
So funny thing happened, Tom. I got my times mixed up because we wrapped up Weird Things early. I thought I only had an hour and 13 minutes until Cord Killers in which to fit this episode. So I said, I have an hour and 13 minutes to watch Ted Lasso before I have to go right on to Cord Killers. Watch it about halfway through. I'm like, oh my goodness, I thought this was a positive show. Where's the punching? Where is this going? Everything's dark and blah. And then Ted has this breakdown, and he vividly describes his dad's why he's angry at his father, and
I actually really liked the intercut of Rebecca's story about her dad and Ted's story about his dad, and the way they bounce that back and forth, two different situations, but two very similar reactions. I thought that was clever.
Yeah, and it was also a good harmonic reminder that this is, we might be tempted to forget that this is a will they, won't they story, especially as we begin to see Rebecca and Sam pair off in what appears to be a happy, healthy relationship. But at any rate, so as he describes it, they're able to get a single tear. I'm like, oh, Ted Lasso, you did it. You got a single tear out of me. And then they just kept punching, and then I'm sobbing, and then I'm just a total wreck with puffy eyes, and then I realize, oh, good, Cord Killers isn't for another hour, because it just destroyed me. Yes, they also introduce in here, they bring back the Keeley love triangle with a plausible reason for it. Any story. As much as I don't like the flavor, I don't want to say I don't like the flavor. This flavor is not the flavor that I want from my Ted Lasso, but anything that punched me in the gut as hard as this one did has to be a top quality episode, by mathematically speaking.
Yeah, one of the things I think Ted Lasso is trying to do this season is say, look, you were surprised that these flat characters were deep last year, but we actually didn't have to work that hard to do that. This year, we are going to make sure they are deep. We are going to deal with heartbreak, with breakdowns, and with death. This is their dealing with death episode, and I think they did a great job of that. There's still enough lighthearted and funny moments that I didn't feel like it was a total weight on me to watch this episode. And I thought they did a couple other interesting things. You mentioned the love triangle. I was a little worried that we were maybe headed towards a typical like, oh great, Keeley's gonna make a mistake, and then Roy's gonna have to forgive her, and it's gonna hurt the relationship with Jamie and all that. But I guess they'll come back together. I don't know if that's gonna happen now, which is good. Maybe it still will. But I liked how Jamie and Roy basically both said the same thing to Keeley. And that gave Keeley a chance to apples compare them and realize, oh yeah, Roy, right? At least in this moment, in this show, when Jamie said it to her, she was troubled. And when Roy said the exact same thing, she immediately hugs him and like, oh, right. Those words coming out of your mouth is where I want to hear them, not out of Jamie's. Not saying that won't change, but I thought that was a nice, clever little twist on that, because you're going to say like, wouldn't she ever have a feeling for Jamie? It'd be kind of unrealistic if she never even thought about it. And they acknowledge that. They're like, yeah, of course she would. Here's what happens.
Yeah, but she's also in an established relationship. Like, if she's going to hug one of the two, it's going to be her current boyfriend.
Sure, but it could have been like a not hug, right?
Yeah.
It could have been
looking now I'm hesitant.
Jamie, and then looking scared when Roy said it.
Right.
Like, oh, wait, I felt better when Jamie, right? But they didn't play it that way. So I feel like they're saying, oh no, Roy is the one that she feels is right. I don't know, the rest of it. I mean, I'm actually kind of confused of where they're going with Rebecca and Sam. I feel like Rebecca's being healthy and Sam's like, no worries, no pressure. I'm going to be a good boyfriend and wait. But I don't know if that means they're just that's going to fall apart or
I mean, waiting is when a surprising, I didn't know that was going to happen, kiss happens between Ted and Rebecca or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
3 cheers for Rebecca's haunting, sad rendition of "Never Gonna Give You Up." Like, you know, she brings out that you know, that karaoke singing voice.
Yeah.
What did you guys think about that performance then?
I teetered back and forth between being uncomfortably embarrassed by watching it and starting to feel like, no, this is working. I'm getting it. I ended up just on the side of it's working, but unlike most Ted Lasso things, I wasn't like, gosh, you did it. You pulled it off. I was still teetering a little bit at the end.
Well, there's a weird energy at funerals where nobody knows what to do, and that they captured that kind of confused, I don't know what to say, you know, that nervous laughter, and the occasional moment of poetry that happens. I was also worried about, like, what, sing along? That's what we're doing here. But that's the kind of thing that truly can happen and does happen at a funeral. For all we know, this was, you know, written based on a real event or whatever.
Yeah. I try not to do this with the Spoilerin time shows, but I skipped through that.
Oh, really?
She started, I was like, oh, that's what they were building this up for. And I watched like the tail end of it because I think one of those skips, I clicked to them where she's about to sing "Never Gonna Say Goodbye," and then Roy says it, and that's a very sweet moment. And then we went to the next scene. But I think if I watched it, I probably would have had the same feeling. But I was kind of really shocked that they were trying. I respected that they do that. And I don't think it's a bad idea to like try to recontextualize that song, I guess. But part of me was just like, that was like I don't know, that it's too jokey. For me, it's too jokey. Never Gonna Give You Up's too jokey to be serious in that way.
It was hard. And I think for me, they just barely, because it wasn't an actual sing along, it was a little bit of a chant and they'd had the story before, they just barely pulled it off for me. The other thing that struck me, and maybe this helped, was the lyrics of Never Gonna Give You Up are what Rebecca's mom wanted to have heard from her husband and never did. She forgave him because she loved him.
Right.
But I think the reason she liked that song is that song was telling her what she would have liked to believe about her husband, what she would have liked to hear from him, which, as cheesy as it is never going to let you down, never going to run around and, you know, hurt you, all of that. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. It makes sense that would be her favorite song, maybe.
Oh, also, cheers to Jason Sudeikis's performance of like that very visceral, real breakdown moment. That was uncomfortably believable.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Any other thoughts on Ted Lasso?
Is it one last thought? Look, look, I get it. The second acts have to be dark. Good God, you have to exactly mirror opposite everything we loved about the first season. Like, right, I was real happy around this time, season 1. Now I'm real unhappy.
Yeah. It's just wait till we find out who his father is.
Oh, jeez.
Loses a hand. All right. That is Ted Lasso, season 2, episode 10. Let's talk about What We Do in the Shadows, season 3, episode 5, The Chamber of Judgment, in which Nandor and Nadia become the judges and try to share the throne, while Laszlo and Colin Robinson hang out with the boys and help someone with their pyramid scheme.
So I have expressed that everything's, I don't know. I watched this one in pretty much the best possible circumstances, which is with my very, very excited 13-year-old daughter, who just was very upset to find out that I was watching episodes without her. And hearing her laughter, her genuine laughter, buoys all of this a lot. But having said all that, I did really like the clever, the pitch perfect execution of what it's like to be on a Hollywood choreography set. As they're trying to go through the opening dance number and they're arguing about where people should stand and stuff. You're like, all right, everybody back to 1 and 5, 6, 7, 8 and all that stuff. I enjoyed all of that. I actually really like that this episode was kind of a naked attempt to bring back that one of the mosquitoes, and they explain like, hey, that dude that was left for dead, he's here, and that's a really fun, interesting way to portray just a clueless vampire, and a counterpart to Guillermo.
And also Guillermo, what is Guillermo's biggest wish in life? To become a vampire. And here is Derek, who became a vampire, right?
And I think Guillermo has entered a new phase where he's realized, it's better than being a vampire.
Maybe we're seeing that. Yep.
Yeah, and the I wish they had drawn the Colin Robinson bit or the multi-level marketing bit. Like, I wish they had focused more of a magnifying glass on the fact that how I think it was Hannibal Montana on Twitter said, "You're telling me Colin Robinson of all people would never have heard of a multi-level marketing scheme and would not reckon like you would expect to focus more on the fact that he's being energy vampired." And
I thought he was gonna love it. I thought he was gonna grin like a Cheshire cat when they brought up multi-level marketing. And instead, he looked kind of bummed. And I was like, okay, what's the explanation for that? We never got one.
Exactly. And then it just went nowhere. And then he just gets bullied around by Laszlo, who like at this point, it is very clear to me that Matt Berry is working on other big projects. And like, I mean, the fact that they wrote into the power struggle that he's like, here are three big players and a power position. Well, I'm out, not because I have another project and could only be here for half a day.
He was in half the episode though, so they could have put him in that half.
Sure.
I think that was a storytelling choice. I know you like to read in behind the scenes affecting choices, but I think it really was a story choice. Because otherwise, then Colin's just off on his own, and you don't have a B story.
Yes. Although I didn't know. I don't know that I believed Colin getting bossed around as much as he was this episode. Everything. I
don't either. That's the thing. Like, I like that Laszlo and Colin have become buddies, and that's enough of an explanation for me to be like, oh, Laszlo, he's not interested in power. He's interested in porn. So he and his buddy Colin would go up and do stuff. But why is Colin suddenly not powerful? Maybe there's an explanation coming, or maybe it's just.
We've also seen some pretty heavy Colin episodes, so maybe just for balance, it's like, hey, we need to strengthen up Nandor's story and so on.
Yeah, but there we go. That is the episode, The Chamber of Judgment. Any other thoughts on that?
They're fine. They're all
fine. Yeah.
They're good. I'm enjoying watching these shows. I have nothing to say about this episode. I really enjoyed watching it, and I have nothing to say about it. I forget what the episode even is half the time.
If I was going to audition this show and try to convince somebody that they need to watch it and love it like I do, I can't think of a single episode from this season that I would lead off with.
Probably not. But this season's also very tied into, like, this is for a story of the week comedy. This is kind of serialized.
Got more of an arc. Yeah.
But it's good. I don't hate it.
If I were to use a baseball metaphor, I'd say this episode moved the runner over. It wasn't a ground out. It was an out, but it was a productive out.
Also, some weird, like, one note, almost like just somebody had an idea, like there was one last note card in the writer's room, and they're all like, oh yeah, it says here, Hellhound equals Golden Retriever. Let's just throw that on at the end.
Oh, I loved that. What are you talking about? That was great.
Had no context, no reason. It was
tension. They kept building it up, and then it's a little Golden Retriever.
It's exaggerating the unknown, and then finding out like, oh yeah, it's just a golden. It's fine. I love that. I thought it was great. No, you didn't like that?
I thought it was a funny enough one-note joke that was an appendage stapled on to a episode that otherwise did not need it at all.
All right. I thought it was a funny joke that only made the episode better. Like many a golden retriever. I just call golden retrievers a joke. They're not a joke. That is what we do in the shadows. Season 3, episode 5. Let's talk about Star Trek Lower Decks, season 2, episode 7, Where Pleasant Fountains Lie. This is an episode where we get to meet the engineer, the chief engineer's family, and it's a somewhat classic. We've got the friendly alien race that has a secret plan that we didn't know about.
I thought this was an exceptional episode, and it was tight with the A story and the B story being different.
Oh shoot! And I didn't even mention the what I think is probably the A story, really, which is the sentient computer and Mariner and Boimler being stranded.
I perceive that as the B story. That's interesting. But you're right. That probably is the A story now that I'm thinking about it. But that whole hard left turn, like first there's the kind of left turn of okay, this crazy lady wants something, but then it turns out he's a prince, and
and that is a clear send up for anyone who doesn't know of Deanna Troy's character in Star Trek The Next Generation, who's just an empathic counselor. And then one day her mother arrives on the ship and we find out that Deanna is royalty on Beta Z, heir to the holy rings of Beta Z. So it was like basically saying, like, what if that happened to the chief engineer on the Cerritos, I guess.
Well, I thought it was an awesome left turn. I thought it was a fairly obvious, so she's always trying to trick me into having sex. What an explosion. Oh, he must be legitimately dead. What? He's alive? This was all a trick to get him to have sex?
Loxana Troy is always trying to get Deanna married, so in perfect Lower Decks fashion, they're like, what if it wasn't just married? What if like straight up needed him to breed? And that was great. I thought that was a great take on all of that.
This was also maybe I'm reading too much into this, and you could tell me whether I am. But to put a button on that thread, I got kind of a vibe of there, without hitting you over the head or making a big deal about it. It felt kind of like this was a making a positive representation of an asexual person, which is something that I hadn't. It was really interesting that I didn't realize that quite likely was the very intentional purpose of it until the very end.
That's a really good point. In fact, I'm if there are any Ace or Arrow folks in the audience, I'd love to hear your perspective on that depiction and on that character, and what it meant to you to see it in Lower Decks. Because you're right, I did think that while I was watching it. It's a really, really good point.
Well, and I guess specifically, if you want to write in, whether or not you perceive it as a positive representation, because it seemed like a very positive representation to me, if that's what they were going for. But meanwhile, the whole, like, it was right around the moment that I'm like, man, this is really out of character for Boimler to be so turning evil and selfish like this. Wait a minute.
Taking the classic Star Trek plot and twisting it and exaggerating it is what Lower Decks does very well, and they did it with that story too, with the computer that tricks people into killing themselves, that just wants to keep tricking people into killing themselves. And Boimler gets the upper hand, and Mariner should have never doubted. Neither should we. I had the same thing. I'm like, man, Boimler is really like, is he going to give in? Like, that seems kind of boring that he would just give in and Mariner would have to save him again. No, not what was going on.
I actually did bark laughter because they said you're just hooked up to the dimmer switch, and then they waited just the right perfect comedic time for me to assume that they were done with that, and it was like, I'll destroy you now, and then the light just goes off and on.
Click. Yeah.
And I did like the end shot of the Bronx neighborhood of evil machines yelling at each other that they're all full of it.
Another little Star Trek hat tip: the voice of Agamus, if it sounded familiar to anybody and you didn't look it up, was Jeffrey Combs, who played Weyoun on Deep Space Nine. He played many other characters on both the Next Generation and Enterprise, and I think he even showed up on Voyager. So he's kind of been a classic character actor throughout Star Trek history. So it was nice to hear his voice again, even if it was a homicidal maniac computer. It was great.
It was well performed. I really dug the energy.
Any other thoughts on Lower Decks Season 2, Episode 7?
Nope. I liked this episode in particular quite a bit.
Fantastic. Well, that's it for this week, folks. Thanks for being with us. You get these episodes early if you're a patron. Don't forget, patreon.com/cordkillers. Next week, we will talk about What We Do in the Shadows, Episode 6, Ted Lasso, Episode 11, and Lower Decks, Episode 8. We will spoil you then.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.